It's time for the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show.
Good morning, Charleston, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. I'm, of course, your host, Brian Beatty, and today is a special episode because we're going through real estate horror stories in celebration of Halloween. So I have a very special guest in the studio today. Her name is Lynda Futch. She is the Director of Operations for my company. Welcome. Good morning.
Thank you. Welcome.
So we're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to talk about, all the different crazy things that happen throughout the course of a real estate transaction, some of which, will probably shock and surprise some of the listeners. But why don't you just start with kind of telling folks who you are and what you do?
Okay. Well, I am Lynda Futch. I am the Director of Operations, so I kind of handle all the day-to-day transactional paperwork detail of listings for our sellers and closings, contract to closing for our buyers. I do a lot more stuff, but I also do some marketing. I do some social media posting. But really my main focus is coordinating listing to final closing for our clients. So I coordinate with attorneys and lenders and other agents from other companies, inspectors, CL 100 providers, kind of anything anyone would need from me. That's what I do.
Gotcha. So she's really the one behind the scenes that makes everything happen and make sure all the parts are in place and that we have a smooth and successful transaction. She's the quarterback for all of that. So obviously in the course of you having been in real estate, how long have you been in real estate again? Remind us.
Oh, I got my license in 2007.
So between her and I, we've got 40 years collectively of experience and stories to draw from,
yes,
right? For this particular episode, we would never have enough time to fit them all into an hour. But we're going to highlight some of the best ones, or at least some of the most recent ones, so that you guys can learn from some of these challenges. And let's be honest, it's not a happy-go-lucky real estate market right now. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's challenging. It's confusing. It's emotional. And, we have the blessing of working with a lot of clients and helping them navigate this market, this process, and everything that comes along with it. So let's start first with, because we could go in so many different directions with this, Lynda, but let's maybe start first with the folks that have properties they'd like to sell. They don't necessarily need to sell, right? It's not like they are up against a bona fide deadline, right? There's no date where if I'm not sold by this date, something bad happens. But they'd like to sell. They're maybe ready for the next chapter of their life. Maybe they'd like to move and be closer to grandkids, or just downsize for simplification reasons. Maybe you've got folks too that are doing well financially, that have the ability to move into something bigger and better, and that supports their needs. But selling a house right now is the market's sending really mixed signals, and I think it's really challenging for folks to grasp what separates a home that sells quickly from one that doesn't. Even though from our perspective, sometimes the answer is really simple. It just might not be the answer that the seller wants to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that one thing that we really pride ourselves on at our real estate team is being clear with folks about our opinion of what needs to happen for them to sell their house, right? We're not a beat around the bush, kind of tell you what you want to hear type real estate company. Of course, we say everything with grace and compassion, but we're not going to shy away from telling people the truth. And I understand it. That's our version of the truth, right? It's
mm-hmm.
our interpretation of the market and what's happening and what needs to change in order for you to get your home sold. And so the reality is properties are sitting on the market for longer. One of the reasons why they're sitting on the market for longer isn't necessarily because there's this new major influx of new listings for sale. I mean, yes, we've seen more and more properties hitting the market over time. It's kind of slowly growing. It's like a slowing rising tide. But there's a real kind of lack of demand in the market right now. And I'll give you a perfect example. And I'll try to, I always like to try and change the facts around a little bit so it's not so relevant to current issues and clients. But I showed a house to a buyer that I'm close with, have known for a long time. And the property I showed them, frankly, it's a great deal. I mean, it's really well priced. It's priced probably 5 to 7% below what it should be priced at. And if you think back to markets past, like that house would never have sat on the market for more than a day or two. That would have gotten eaten up. There'd be multiple offers, and it probably would have sold for 5 to 7% or more than what they're currently asking. Well, my particular buyer, my friend, who doesn't live here, he lives in a different state, it's a second home for him, has taken about a week and a half to get to the point where they know they wanted to make an offer after they left the property, but they had, conversations with financial advisors and accountants, and they're just making sure that all their ducks are in a row. And part of me is like, I would love it if we could expedite this process, because things like this are a rarity, right? These properties don't come on the market very often. And on top of that, they're not usually priced as well as this one is. I've bit my tongue on that, but after a week and a half, the property's still on the market, and we now have the listing agent kind of like begging us to make an offer. And it just reminds me of when the market was kind of in the tank post 2008, and we actually were doing reverse offers on our own listings. I don't know if you recall that period in time where the market crashed in 2008, and sellers were so basically desperate to sell their house because there were so many properties on the market. Like, we've got a little over 5,200 properties on the market right now in the Charleston metro area. I think in 2011 or maybe 2012, early part of 2012, we had over 12,000, and we had not nearly as many transactions as we needed to keep up with that inventory. So what sellers would do is they would approach buyers after the showing and be like, "Hey, I'd like to make you an offer to buy my house." Now, we're certainly not in that market yet. That was kind of an extreme reaction to just a complete lack of demand among buyers because they had so many choices. But I think that there are a lot of sellers that are either on the market right now or considering selling, or maybe tried selling earlier this year and it just didn't work out, that are scratching their head, wondering what needs to happen in order for them to actually sell their house. And so we have had a lot of folks that we have worked with in the time that you've been at the company, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of transactions. And so we're going to pick a few that have been particularly challenging for us and just talk about it and talk about like the lesson that can be learned from it. So with all that you do, Lynda, I'm going to give you the honor of choosing kind of that first scenario, that first story that that we can kind of pick apart and digest together on air and help people understand, like, when things like this happen, what can be done, if anything? How do we respond to it? How do we, as best we can, prevent things like that from happening in the first place? So what do you think? What should we talk about first?
How about one of our listings?
Okay.
So we have a great listing in a very popular part of town. And it, on the outside and inside, everything looks so great. It's charming. It's cute. It's gone from brick to white is the thing. It's a ranch. Everybody wants a ranch right now. It's got enough space. The yard is great. And we had it under contract, priced right, had it under contract. So we get an inspection done, the buyer does, and inspection comes back, and now we have to disclose that there are things that could be fixed. And so we do that with each prospective buyer, and it's kind of scared them off. Our sellers aren't local. They don't particularly want to do, major renovations to make this more attractive for buyers. And they're a little bit hesitant because they aren't local. It's a lot to oversee repairs when you don't live in town. And so that's where I think we've come in. We're doing research right now on all of the options. They're feeling frustrated, but in our research, we've come across three companies that we've worked with in the past, but we haven't yet use this pre-listing repair programs that 3 of our vendors have. And so I think the more I dig into it, the better these options look for our sellers, because they can go ahead and take care of major repairs like the roof or the crawl space. Everything else is kind of nitpicky, but these major things that are turning off buyers, we can go ahead and have them taken care of. I will oversee and just keep everyone in the loop with our vendors, and then they can pay a small deposit for one of these programs and then defer the rest of that payment until closing. And I think with that little zhuzh to the house, it is going to sell at the price we have it at, or maybe even more, because it's now going to be a more attractive investment for those buyers, because this is more of like a first time or a downsize when you're older type of property.
Yeah. And so, I think that it's really important that we bring solutions to the table for people. Right. And there are a lot, and I know because we talk to them all the time. We represent them all the time. There are plenty of folks out there that have really benefited from the appreciation in the market over the past several years. I mean, really, if you think about it, prices have been ticking up since 2014. So the longer you've owned your home, the more it's worth in relation to what you bought it for. So, yeah, you're sitting on a lot of equity, but there are also plenty of people that are living paycheck to paycheck. I saw a stat earlier that 80% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Credit card debt is super high. Just debt in general is super high. Savings are not looking very good if you look at the numbers on that. And so a lot of people own homes with equity, right, with cash locked into their house, but they don't have the check to write to make the repairs that the buyer want them to make. So the challenge in this market is, if you're looking to buy a house and you want to do a renovation, there are plenty of things to choose from. But if you don't, if you want something move-in ready, like we're finding so many people want right now, and the seller doesn't have the ability to make those updates or renovations prior to putting it on the market, those are the ones that are kind of sitting for a little bit longer, because you're looking for a buyer that is in a bit of a unique scenario. Like, as an example, if that house needs new flooring, well, then that means that buyer is going to have to be able to buy that house and then not live in it for whatever period of time the house is unlivable during renovations. So that puts a lot of extra strain on the buyer. It complicates things to the nth degree, because now they're looking at short-term housing. Now they have to have the cash to be able to do those things in addition to the cash associated with buying the house. And it just complicates things.
Yep.
So this is a fantastic solution. And I think there are plenty of people that are probably out there listening that know that, my house is clean. It's in good shape. It's just not updated to today's standards, right? The bathrooms are a little tired. Maybe the kitchen is in need of a facelift. Either that, or they have real repairs that need to be made, and they just can't afford to do it. So we now have access to companies that will agree to make all those repairs and or renovations and defer a very large portion of that project until the point in time that you close on the house.
Yep.
Which is really, really helpful. And honestly, the challenge is, you think about it from like a real estate investor perspective. If you go and you try and find a property that you want to just buy and stick a tenant in, because prices are so high, because interest rates are so high, because insurance and taxes and everything else is just high, you're not really making any money on a rental property purchase unless you can buy it for a very low percentage of what it's actually worth. And that's what they say in investing in real estate, is that you make your money when you buy it, not when you sell it, because you can control the purchase based on the return on investment you need for that investment to be worthwhile. Well, sellers right now, I think, are really getting hit hard by the fact that their home does need updates, it does need repairs, and they don't have the ability to fix it. They just don't have the cash. Or they don't have the temperament for it. Or maybe there's some sort of extenuating circumstance where they can't leave their house for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks while some of these things get taken care of.
Right.
So this, in my mind, is a fantastic solution. So if you're listening and you're in a position where your home needs some updates, it needs some work, I can't tell you the number of times I wish somebody had called me before they decided to do work to their house, because it's almost like cringe worthy hearing how much some people are paying for some of these projects. And contractors are busy. They're busy. So they're making a good living right now.
Right.
And it's pretty easy to get taken advantage of. We talk with investors from other markets, and they're always kind of taken aback by how much things cost to renovate in our market. So maybe that in and of itself, I mean, we probably have, dozens of horror stories of folks that have gotten not necessarily taken advantage of because they agreed to pay the price that the contractor quoted them, but they didn't do their due diligence.
Right.
And find out that there are plenty of other people out there that would have done it for half that.
Yep.
So that in and of itself can be a horror story to avoid. If you have things that you want done to your property or that need to be done to your property, please give us a call first so that we can help introduce you to the people that we have and this ecosystem that we've built full of contractors and lenders and appraisers and closing attorneys and, you name it. We've got a guy, quote unquote, for all of those things. But I hate seeing people that overpay for projects or that have to take a pretty big hit on the sales price because they didn't have the cash on hand to be able to make some of those repairs or updates to the home that would make a huge difference and create a big return on investment for them if they decided to do those things and then just defer payment to closing.
Right.
So that's a good one. What else?
Well, we talked earlier about how I am really the one face-to-face with the agents on the other side of the deal, unless it's within our own team, but more than likely it's going to be an agent from another company. And I think it's very frustrating sometimes because we're there every day working on our files. We have the 40 years combined experience. I've been doing this for a long time. I had really good teachers. I have a very good overseer in my office now. And it is very hard when the other agent on the other side of the transaction is not as easy to work with, well-versed in the real estate business itself, if they're new, if they're hesitant, if they're mistrustful, which is kind of what we run into a lot.
It is. We've got some examples on that. We're going to take a quick break. Keep listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show, the Real Estate Horror Stories edition. We've got a lot more to cover, or a lot more ground to cover, a lot more things to talk about. But if you'd like to reach out to us, again, if you're one of those folks that, your home needs some work, it needs some updates, it needs some repairs, maybe you're struggling to come up with the cash to be able to do those things out of pocket, we have some solutions for you. Give us a call. We'll walk you through the process. 843-800-0065 is our number, 843-800-0065. Or go to listingsincharleston.com, listingsincharleston.com. I'm in the studio with Lynda Futch. Lynda is my director of operations. She is Superwoman, right? She does everything behind the scenes, and people love her. She's a huge part of the team. She is the person responsible for making sure that you know what's going to happen before it happens and then coordinates everything for you so that it's a stress-free or less stressful transaction. There's no such thing as a stress-free transaction in real estate. Let's just put that out there first.
Right.
But let's talk. We kind of teased this before we took a break, but we deal with a lot of challenging real estate agents, right? And I'm not here to throw anybody under the bus, but there are plenty of transactions that occur on an annual basis for us where agents they're the problem, right? They either don't know what they're doing or they insert themselves into the equation and try and push and poke and prod to get something for their client and look like the hero without the client knowing about it or without them asking for it. I mean, sometimes agents really do just ruffle feathers for the sake of trying to get something for their client. And I guess I understand it. I'm used to it. We've done 1,500 transactions on our team. We've represented $1 billion worth of real estate in this market. So it's bound to happen sooner or later. But you sometimes get a lot of grief from real estate agents because you're the transaction coordinator, not the actual agent representing the client, even though you're licensed, have been for 20 years and an integral part of our team and our system. But I'd love to hear your perspective on just some of the challenges that we deal with the other side of the table.
Yes, challenges. We are in real estate because we love it. It's not the same every day, but that's what makes it challenging. It's not the same every day. There's always new hiccups, big personalities, small personalities, lots of different things. And agents are one of the big personalities we run into. And they see transaction coordinator and think that, I've just started out. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of there to push papers. But in reality, I am experienced, and I sit next to you every day and I learn every single day through every single transaction, something new. And recently we've had kind of a complicated sale that's kind of out of our norm. And the agent on the other side, wasn't super experienced. And so we gathered our brains together along with attorneys, and we were just trying to kind of guide her and the lender on their side. They're the buyers. The lender was trying to also guide her. And so she didn't want to be guided necessarily. So that's when I had kind of have to step in and just start getting things going. Because our ultimate goal, we're all working for the same goal, is a successful sale, whether we're on the buyer side or the seller side. And so this time we were on the seller side. So the seller and I started working very closely with the buyer's lender to get everything that was needed, because this was a different type of financing situation. And the seller and I laughed as we walked through this together. It was something new every day for 2 weeks, something new, something that they had to pay for per the contract, just because that kind of fell into their transaction costs. And we laughed, like, we're learning so much. And so now the next time we have this certain kind of listing come across our table, we know what to ask.
Right. It was a very non-traditional situation and
Yes.
sale, without getting too specific. But when you have a complicated transaction like that, it's really important that you're working with somebody that has experience to draw from, right? The ability to problem solve.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that was kind of missing from the other side of the table for a large portion of that transaction. And we don't mind doing, things that the other agent should be doing. I mean, you also get a ton of, look, agents are lazy. Let's just put it out there. A lot of agents are lazy, and whatever they can pass the buck on, they're going to pass the buck on. Whatever they can automate, they're going to automate. They love the set it and forget it approach. And so they also have, like you as an example, like let's say that we come to an agreement on something. The vast majority of the time that agent's like, okay, cool. Can you write that up for me? And part of you is like, I don't work for you, but
we like it, because if we're asked to do that, we can write it with language that we've learned over the years that benefits our client, instead of just having them sign some random document that another agent with maybe less experience, maybe the same, has sent to us. So I can kind of craft it in a way that's really beneficial, more so for our client than it is for the other side. So that kind of gives us one more element of control.
It gives us a little power over the situation.
Yeah, which is nice, because sometimes we don't feel like we have that. So it's good.
Yeah. I mean, look, if another agent is going to ask you to write the addendum
For their client.
Based on something they're requesting, then of course we're going to write it in a way that benefits us. And the reality is most agents don't really understand that by giving us that control and that power, we're using it to benefit our client.
Right.
So there's, throughout the course of a real estate transaction, there are all these little moments of like power grabs, right?
Yep.
And that power shifts between buyers and sellers as you're negotiating.
Right.
So it's never a good idea to give up your power if you can.
No.
There's so much we could talk about, but again, I don't want to just sit here and badmouth real estate agents. We all play in the same sandbox, right?
Yeah.
We're all here trying to do the best we can for our clients. It's just that we want to do a better job than they do because we want our client to win.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Sorry, I'm competitive. I played college sports. I played sports my whole life. It's just ingrained in my DNA. I want my clients to win.
I'll encourage you in that.
Respectfully, right?
Correct.
With integrity, with honesty. What's another topic that we can cover with regard to this episode, real estate horror stories?
What about when people don't follow the lines of the contract and things that they've agreed to after closing?
Mm-hmm.
When they have done something, after the final walkthrough, something has happened, and then we hear about it after the documents are signed and the funds have been released.
Is it something that our clients did or something their clients did? This is kind of the funny part about this show, guys. It's like we're doing this in real time, and honestly, the funny thing is we could talk for hours and hours and hours about the challenges of the real estate market, but sometimes things are just a little too personal. I mean, at the end of the day, we owe our clients confidentiality, so we're not here to just like air their dirty laundry. Elaborate on that a little bit if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, so a couple years ago, we had a transaction where some items were supposed to stay with the house and some items were supposed to go. Our seller, was kind of attached emotionally. She didn't realize to one of the items that was supposed to stay with the house, which sometimes in a transaction where things are sold furnished and the buyer's agent doesn't take a really good inventory, things will leave with the seller that were supposed to stay to the buyer. But if the buyer's agent doesn't give us a full list, it's very hard to keep track of, especially for the seller too.
Sure.
If it's an estate sale and it was your great aunt from that you didn't know very well. So, you just take things you like and everything else stays the same. So we did have the seller's agent, the seller's like personal representative of their estate started selling things on Facebook Marketplace that were actually supposed to stay with the house. So they went in to do their walkthrough and, X, Y, and Z weren't in the house, but they didn't give us a full inventoried list of what they wanted. So the personal representative of the estate, who wasn't emotionally invested, just was trying to make some money, and was selling these things. So, once we figured out what was happening, we were able to just explain, hey, nothing else can go. Not a piece of trash, not one single fork because of what you have signed. And once she understood, we're talking like everything. You can try to tell people everything, but sometimes it doesn't
compute.
Yes, especially when they're in an estate sale that they're out of state. They don't really know the person that they're executing this estate for. So that's where we come in, and I was just like, okay, you can't sell one more thing. They want everything. And she's like, but I said, the paperwork would stay, or I would take the paperwork. I'm like, but you sold the cabinet. So paperwork can go, cabinet stays,
Right.
And obviously we didn't have to go back and find whoever the stranger was on Marketplace, but the buyer's agent was actually on our team. So it was actually a more friendly, I'm so sorry, ask for forgiveness and not do it again than it could have been.
Yeah, it could have been bad. And the reality is it's a legal document that you're signing, right? And we have had a lot of folks, not really on like our clients, but frankly, we've had a lot of folks on the other side of the transaction that just feel like they don't need to follow the rules.
Yep.
And that the deadlines don't apply.
Right.
And there are major consequences for, breaching the contract. I mean, lawyers love when people do that. That's how they make a living. Just follow the rules and make sure, information is power, right? Communication is key. We always try to over-communicate with our clients, but we can't control the actions of others.
Right.
We can only inform and educate.
Right.
And sometimes we have to deal with really challenging situations that are just not fair or just not right, right? People behaving in ways that we would never behave in or that we would advocate our clients behave that way. But sometimes you just have to deal with the unfortunate people and things in life that you just didn't know until you got into the agreement with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really challenging. That's what makes things really tough sometimes, is when people aren't following, the golden rule and just take, push, prod, poke, all of it. It makes for a really challenging transaction. But I think that's why you hire an agent that is calm, cool, collected, level-headed, experienced, and has a long track record of problem solving and honestly problem preventing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really where the experience comes in, is preventing things from getting to the point where it becomes a severe challenge to move forward.
Yeah.
So good points there. All right, we're going to take a break and come back for a little bit more of real estate horror stories with Lynda Futch. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show right here on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. Remember, if you want to reach out to us, you're thinking of buying, selling, investing in real estate, maybe you have a property you'd like for us to property manage for you, then you can reach out to me. You can call or text 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check us out online, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. And remember to check us out on YouTube as well. We've got a lot of content on there. Every radio show we do, we video and we put it on YouTube. So if you want to put a face with the voice, check us out there. I'm in the studio still with my director of operations, Lynda Futch. She is the person that sits next to me every day, puts up with me and all the craziness associated with running a big real estate company. And she's the one behind the scenes that works with our buyer and seller clients to coordinate the process of buying and selling a home. So she sees all the craziness, right? Just as much as I do, probably even more, honestly. Let's talk about another kind of not specific moment in time or specific scenario, but we were talking off air about one of the real horror stories of our market right now, and that's
Somerville.
All right, let's talk about it. What do you have to say about that?
Well, during COVID, we had this influx of folks in Somerville. Everybody wanted to be in Somerville. We would get a Somerville listing and it would be sold in an hour. And I knew immediately this wasn't going to last. It didn't matter what it was priced at. It didn't matter anything. A lot of it was new-ish construction, but it did not sit on the market at all. Everybody wanted to be in Somerville back then. All the folks coming in from out of state, Somerville was where they wanted to be. It was building up.
Yeah, it was the number
affordable.
3 most relocated to zip code in the nation, like 2 years ago.
Yeah, and that's what it felt like to us.
Maybe
Somerville listing, no problem. That'll be sold in an hour. Don't even have to leave your house, really. I mean, it was just that easy to sell. And so lately, in the last couple of years, we've noticed a major slowdown. And not even just a slowdown, it's just we get a Somerville listing and we are very honest and open with the seller. Hey, this market is not moving. You've got to be different. You've got to have creative thinking and we'll help you kind of navigate that. But don't expect from when you bought in 2020 when it was such a hot market and you could barely get your offer in before it was under contract, don't expect that.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's probably not going to happen. We won't say never because we're always surprised every day, but probably not going to happen.
Yeah. Obviously, the challenge there are all the folks that, bought their home a few years ago, right? Maybe even at the point in time they bought it, it was new construction, and they've now got, an existing pre-owned home in a neighborhood that's still building a large number of new construction homes. The challenge that market has right now are all the homeowners competing with the builders.
Yeah.
I did a big show last time we were on air talking about the fact that, builders have shrinking profit margins. They're making next to nothing on the lending side, and they're promoting ridiculous incentives to buyers just to be able to move their inventory so that their inventory doesn't sit on the market, right? They've got expenses they have to carry, and so they need those homes to sell. So for the folks that own in, certain pockets of Somerville, you're in that price point where you're competing with all these new construction homes. These builders are offering like 3% interest rates or interest rate buy downs or, massive amounts of closing costs. I mean, they really are trying to incentivize and take the buyers from existing homeowners so that you don't really stand a chance in terms of your competitive edge against a new construction home.
Right.
So it's a very challenging market right now for a Somerville homeowner that's going to compete with new construction inventory. So we have to be creative, right? And so let's talk for just a moment about some of the things that we're doing to help people understand how they need to compete in order to actually get their home sold.
Right. So we had a listing in one of those neighborhoods, and a young couple, they were moving. They had we're seeing a lot of young couples moving in for a job and then moving out to a larger city for jobs. And these younger folks tend to have a little bit more. They have higher incomes than we would have had, back at their ages in their 20s. And so this particular one I'm thinking about in Somerville, they got transferred to a large city, and we were showing their house a lot. I mean, they did, it was a one-level starter home. It was very cute. They had only had it a year. So it was a 2024 build. And they got a contract. And finally, because we had showing after showing, it was, we're going to go with new construction. We're going to go with new construction, because it was basically the same house for a less interest rate than they had. So what they decided to do was, once they were under contract, it was great. We were excited. They had already moved out. We got to a couple weeks before closing, and then it was in the spring. So taxes hadn't been filed yet for the buyer and their co-signer and all of the things. Well, you have to have 2 years at your job for this co-signer.
Yeah, this loan product they were going for.
Yes. And so she didn't have 2 years. She was successful, but she didn't have 2 years at her current job, and she was self-employed. So what we decided to do, instead of letting that deal fall through, is the sellers were open to basically a delayed closing for a year. So we're going to close in the spring of 2026. And we were able to get our property manager to come in and vet them, and they're going to just rent it to the buyers for a year. So our property manager was able to come in, do all of the credit checks that he does. He manages everything. If there's, a water leak or whatever, he's there to do that for the client. So it's almost like they have no stress, because they know they're closing. We knew from the lender, like, yes, she'll be able to close next year, no big deal. But we have to have that for this certain loan product that was advantageous to the buyers.
And just maybe to be clear and to maybe help people understand a few things, like whenever somebody makes an offer on one of our listings and that buyer is getting a mortgage, of course we call that lender and we verify that they've been through the qualification process. Yeah. And in this particular instance, they had, but for whatever reason, I guess their letter and that lender didn't either admit or decided to strategically prevent us from understanding that we were waiting on a tax return that just hadn't been filed yet. And now this particular owner, it worked for them because they were able to cash flow on their house. So they're now making money on that investment. They'll be able to close on it next year, which is more advantageous for them from a tax perspective. And not everybody's going to be in this position, but it's nice to be able to offer the flexibility to people and creative solutions for people, rather than just thinking of things through the traditional lens of, I have to buy and sell right now. There are so many ways to kind of skin the cat, if you will, and alternative methods to buying and selling that it just makes sense to talk about that. And we've talked about a lot of those different things on this show. I think if you go to YouTube and you just, you look up like creative solutions on our YouTube channel or things along those lines, you're going to find a long list of information that you might not have even known existed as it relates to buying and selling a home through creative ways. Yeah. Right. So maybe that's just a reminder to go check us out on YouTube. Yeah. Just search the Brian Beatty Team. All right. So stick around, because we've got one more segment, one more thing to talk about. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show, the Real Estate Horror Stories edition. Happy Halloween, everybody. If you want to reach out to us, 843-800-0065 is our number, 843-800-0065. Or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. I'm with Lynda Futch, my director of operations. She is the person behind the scenes that helps navigate all of these transactions for our real estate team. And so we've covered a lot of ground. There are a lot of things that we could talk more about, I guess, in greater detail, but just out of respect for those people, their situations, and the confidentiality associated with that, we tried to be a little more on the vague side.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry if some of these lessons didn't quite hit as close to home. We just want to be respectful of people. But we're always dealing with something new. There's always some new challenge in real estate, which makes it kind of fun. And, one thing we're dealing with right now
is AI.
Yes. It used to be that we had to combat Zillow because, Zillow's Zestimate comes out, and that's now, the gold standard for some reason, right? Like people were trusting Zillow's opinion of value more than a very experienced real estate agent. And so there was a whole, thing associated with helping people understand why Zillow's Zestimate is just not as good as a local, knowledgeable realtor's opinion of value for their house. Zillow doesn't know anything about the condition of your house,
right?
Or the upgrades that you have or don't have, or your level of motivation, or what caused other people to sell and how that impacts you, and so on and so forth. So the challenge with AI is people allowing like ChatGPT and Gemini and all these different things to kind of do the thinking for them. Now, I appreciate self-education. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this show, is to educate and inform and hopefully entertain a little along the way. But we're struggling with folks that are pushing back against our advice because ChatGPT said, or AI said, and it's a tough hurdle to overcome at times. But I love it when folks educate and inform themselves. We'd love the opportunity to continue to be that source of information for you. If you'd like to get your hands on our home seller guide, we've updated it. So we've got top, the information within it has been top graded and relevant to today's market.
Right.
So if you'd like to get a copy of that real estate guide, it's the most comprehensive home seller guide in Charleston. Just text the word guide to 843-800-0065. Text the word guide to 843-800-0065, or you can always just reach out to us through our website, listingsincharleston.com. Lynda, thank you so much for taking time to be on the show and for all the things that you do for us and our clients. Thanks for listening. You guys enjoy your Halloween weekend. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA.
Join us for another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 10. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065.